Hi, this is Bruce Rawles. I'm speaking again with Susan Dugan. And as usual, we're talking about A Course in Miracles. Today's topic that Susan suggested, which is a wonderful one, is section 20 in the manual for A Course in Miracles. What is the peace of God? And that's a great question. So something that we're all trying to figure out. And um, you asked if we skip over the first paragraph, but if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to read it anyway. Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. I just think it's a great, rhetorical questions. It has been said that there's a kind of peace that is not of this world. How is it recognized? How is it found? And being found, how can it be retained? Let us consider each of these questions separately, for each reflects a different step along the way. And I think it's kind of when I read that, I get sort of this humorous image of Jesus asking us, where do I get it? How do I find it? How can I put it on auto order so that I don't have to, auto reorder, so I don't have to keep coming back to make sure it's in my inbox or, being delivered routinely. But
Well,
those are
and
the
just, yeah,
things. Yeah. Anyway, thoughts across my mind as I was reading
kind
it the other
of
day.
responding to the questions that we're always asking. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
he's repeating questions that all course students ask a lot. But I think the whole point of that paragraph in this entire section, which is a question, and
Mhm.
it comes from the manual for teachers, and it is the whole point is to recognize that I don't know what the peace of God is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we as course students, we really, we think we're these individual selves that are learning the course, and we're constantly trying to project that doing and efforting and sense of wanting to master something onto our study with the course, and that's not the way it works.
Mhm.
It's a really letting go of any ideas that we have about pretty much everything. um, and that doesn't come easily to us because we are really, once we identify with the ego, which is the part of our mind that believes that separation is real, from the moment that tiny mad idea of what would it be like to be separate from God seemed to arise, which it didn't really have arise, and it didn't really go anywhere, but it seemed to, and we took it seriously. And now we're in the throes of some um, variation of imagining in our, for in seemingly separately, uh, 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 some variation of what the consequences of that would be. And we've forgotten that we're a mind. We don't remember what the peace of God is. We repressed the origin story of how we seem to get into this dream, and we just no longer really understand what peace is, because nothing here is peaceful. Nothing in the dream is peaceful. We're in constant state of chaos, reflecting the chaotic belief that we could, we could shatter one perfect oneness, and have to really devote ourselves to constantly defending ourselves from some sort of annihilation as a result of that really happening, which of course it didn't. So we're in a state already where we're mistaken about everything that we think with a brain that
Yeah.
doesn't really think. And so we need, we need a teacher, which is also in our mind. The course, or Jesus is just a name given to the Jesus, Holy Spirit, a symbol given to the teacher in the mind that is not really the same at all as the historical Jesus or Holy Spirit, because it's completely non-dualistic and completely knowing of the perfect unity within which we continue to abide, And so what is the peace of God? These questions that he's asking, it's always this course in terms of practice requires us to return again and again to a really open-minded awareness that I don't know, and that I need to be taught, that what I've taught myself is wrong, that I don't know what real peace is, and that I'm in school learning, trying to undo the blocks to my awareness, that the blocks that I made up to my awareness of peace. And so, so this is a very, he's meeting us in the level where we think we are, but where we are is really nowhere. So,
Right.
so we have to, we have to kind of go very gently and slowly, and be taught and be open to being taught. But that first step, the first step of forgiveness is to entertain the possibility that I don't know why I'm upset, that the reason that I'm attributing, and he talks a lot about anger in this section, the reason for my anger, my anxiety, my judgmental, my feelings of unfair treatment are not at all related to the dream that I seem to be inhabiting. They really are coming from a mind outside the dream, a part of me that is choosing to dream, as a defense against what it thinks happened, and it's wrong. And so, I need to be re-educated. Right.
Big time.
Yeah, I mean,
For
the
sure.
second step of forgiveness is I could see peace instead of this lesson 34. So, but what is that peace? There's no peace possible in the world, and we keep going back to saying, how do I make peace in my life? How do I make peace in my world? How do I make, how is it, how? And there is a section in the manual, how is peace possible in this world, right? But that's not, you know, we're in school to learn that, but everything that we've taught ourselves about peace is completely wrong, because it's completely dependent on external factors, and external factors here are in constant flux and chaotic and completely unstable, and meant to make us feel unfairly treated. So we really can't turn to them for anything stable or anything peaceful.
Exactly. A moment ago, you used the phrase origin story, and it got me to thinking about something that came up in a course study group online the other day. And that's, I was reminded of Ken Wapnick's brilliant, as all of his stuff is, his brilliant analogy of Orson Welles reading The War of the Worlds on a radio show some decades ago when it first was aired. And I think it was in New Jersey anyway. There were a number of people who tuned into the radio broadcast late, and they didn't hear the opening remarks, which is, this is a dramatization of a science fiction story made to sound like a radio news broadcast. And the
Right.
people that tuned in didn't catch that. And there was a lot of people who actually, on this worldly level, freaked out because they thought the Earth was being invaded by aliens, and there was a number of incidents
They
apparently,
were right.
and they were right. Yeah, exactly. Ironically, yeah. But I think I was thinking, well, what a great metaphor for how we really all blocked out our real origin story, which is we made up the belief in separation, and we took it seriously, and because of that, that intentional, scotoma, I think is the word I've heard for a blind spot, that we don't even want to, we can't even see that that's a possibility, because it's not in the ego's vocabulary, that we made this up, and the ego is dethroned our real identity, and so there's no peace possible in that identity, because it
Right.
was made as an attack on perfect oneness. Yeah.
Right. There's peace possible only in the sense that I can be, my mind can be peaceful.
Right.
I can be at peace regardless of I can learn to be at peace, and that's a long process. Regardless of what's happening in this world. But as he's going to go on to say, the peace of God is completely disconnected from anything that we attribute, that we recognize as peace in this world, which is basically an absence of conflict that maybe exists for a nanosecond, it just in our awareness, because we're not aware of everything that's going on all the time, although increasingly we seem to be, given constant feedback about what's going on. So but there is no, again, there's no peace here, because it was made it was made up to represent a real thought of conflict and a war with God, basically, a one or the other. The whole ego thought system is based on the idea of one or the other, which is what we believe happened with God. we claimed our identity at God's expense, and now we're duking that out, the guilt we feel over that, out with all of our relationships here. We're trying to somehow see ourselves as the less guilty one, to try to feel better about what we've blamed ourselves for, the self-hatred that we carry and that we all carry. But we're just not aware of where it's coming from. And all we're aware of is the the sort of robotic attention to getting rid of it, urge to get rid of it. And even that is not really conscious. It's just we see the world is constantly assaulting us in some way, within our personal life or our collective world. And we're wrong about that.
Yeah. Synchronistically, you mentioned robotic, and I just posted a few links to some new computer-generated animations that anyone can run on their own relatively new computer, and then also there's some artificial intelligence that simulates a person that's very photorealistic talking, and so we we're all always trying to use our minds to continue, when they're in ego mode, the propaganda machine, to convince ourselves that what we made up is real. And so we even reflect that in the world by making simulations of what we think of as reality even more real all the time.
Right.
And it's just kind of it's ultimately is very surreal, but we only see that when we use the Course's metaphysics with Holy Spirit's help to see that we're not at peace and we're not happy, trying to continually factor and recalibrate and reorganize. I was like the holodeck chairs on a Titanic dream metaphor. Is we keep thinking that if I just readjust enough aspects of my personal dream, I can just kind of relax and be peaceful. But it's relentless, isn't it? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, we're the programmer, not the robot that we think we are.
Right.
That's driven by forces beyond its control. That's what we've forgotten, that really this is just, this is all happening within the mind of the programmer. It's nothing real. The robot cannot be autonomous. Although, I recognize that there are scientists who now believe that they can, but
which has made the
anyway,
news recently too. Why
yes,
don't
I
we
think
jump? Why
that's
don't we
it.
jump into the reading? Do you want to
Yes,
start
let's do it. So,
paragraph 2?
sure, you go ahead.
Okay. Oh, okay. First, how can the peace of God be recognized? God's peace is recognized at first by just one thing. In every way, it is totally unlike all previous experiences. It calls to mind nothing that went before. It brings with it no past associations. It is a new thing entirely. There is a contrast, yes, between this thing and all the past, but strangely, it is not a contrast of true differences. Kind of a hint of it's the pure non-duality, can't have differences, right? The
Right.
past just slips away, and in its place is everlasting quiet. Only that. The contrast first perceived has merely gone. Quiet has reached to cover everything. And then last night in your excellent class, I was reminded of the fact that the pure non-duality, perfect oneness doesn't fight our dreams, and so it's like that peace is really there waiting for us beyond all of our attempts to try to figure it out as a separate self.
Right. I mean, once we, are willing again to admit that we don't know and we need help, and to recognize, or at least entertain the possibility that that the way I'm feeling, that my anger, my anxiety, my depression, my sense of unfair treatment is not really related to what I think it is. That's the first step in removing the blocks to the awareness of peace that's always flowing within us. I mean, we couldn't extinguish that peace. That is really the only real part of our mind. So there's the conflict, the idea, the split mind in that moment. The mind the part of our mind that believes that, or that represents the ego, the part of ourself that wants to be separate, And then the memory of wholeness in our mind that is, we refer to as Jesus, Holy Spirit, but it's just that loving presence, aware that, we are still connected with what we are, with truth. That sense of a split in that moment, that we remove the barriers, are willing to let the barriers go. We're not experiencing that conflict. There's no me against God in that moment. There's no me against anyone else, because that's whoever I'm in relationship with at the time is the symbol of my fear of God. That's who I'm in, trying to vie for greater innocence or greater, less guilt with. So yeah, it just kind of dissolves. And as he says, the contrast that was first perceived has merely gone, because it's just part of perception. And the only real part of perception is that memory of wholeness, which reflects the peace of God to us. And so we join with, we remove the barriers, and we are joined with that. But, because we're so afraid of it, and there's that sense of, just complete disorientation for us, as this paragraph alludes to too, we go right back. We usually run away very quickly from that, and we're right back in the dream. And we know how to throw that away, and that is to, have someone or something in our dream seem to upset us again. The anger returns, right? And we're not aware that we've reached into our bag of our grab bag of guilt, our all of the characters in our dream that we peopled it with, that are fictional, that we made, we put in the dream to disturb us. And we know exactly which ones to reach for to quickly go back to ground ourselves in the dream, right?
Yeah, sometimes that seems unconscious too.
Oh, it's completely, yeah.
The people that we pull out, or the events that seem to happen to us instead of coming from us. The other thought that I was wanting to recall was from the last night's conversation was that the Course, just on just about every line, or at least every paragraph, it seems, puts together and juxtaposes the two thought systems of the ego and the Holy Spirit, so that we can look at it. As long as we keep them apart in our mind, and keep the dissociation and the fragmentation, the severance, if you will, if you happen to watch that Apple TV series.
I started it. I haven't gotten through it.
It's a really good metaphor. That's a show where they try to do a material solution to work-life balance, and by severing parts of the mind, with the brain being the mechanism. But anyway, but that, the whole emphasis of the Course is bringing together the things that we've dissociated, and taking the darkness of the ego's insanity and lack of peace, and showing the disquiet next to the quiet, the warring nature of the ego is more clearly seen, in stark contrast when it's brought to the peace in our mind, represented by the Holy Spirit. And then we say, oh, well, why would I want that when we see them clearly together? And I
Right. And when
think
we
that's
have that experience, I'm sorry, of shifting, to that awareness, we just have, it's just there, and we actually have
yeah,
the experience. We know in that moment that that's really all I've been looking for.
yeah.
And so it answers all the questions of, the ego is silent in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
There's no, everyone is included, there's no need to have any opposition. So that we're learning, and then we go back into our dream, and we're angry again, and we're hurting, and we're in pain, and there's an almost, the more that's what the practice of forgiveness is. That's what it means to make your life a forgiveness classroom, is to practice this over and over and over again throughout your day as you become upset, so that contrast becomes more and more stark. And eventually, so at least you choose a little sooner, you choose, but, and it becomes more excruciating, the choice for the ego, which is the great motivator for finally letting it go.
It's almost like, when you said excruciating, it seems like it's almost like we stop taking the painkillers, metaphorically, and so that we notice how much pain we've been in choosing the ego.
Right. Right.
And so it's really kind of like we're
Well, the
gradually easing
painkillers
off the
don't work
ego's
anymore,
drug of mindlessness. What was that again?
Yeah, because we're making this process conscious.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
painkillers don't work. My special relationships, are not solving the problem,
Right.
including the special, all the substitutes for the love of God that I try to fill up that lack with.
Mhm.
Just they don't cut it. They
Right.
don't do it. And the guilt that is, the attempt to relieve myself of that guilt is maladaptive, as Ken Wapnick said brilliantly.
Mhm.
It's a maladaptive solution to a non-existent problem. And so, it's really the contrast that we're talking about is just really learning through practice, 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 and usually over quite a bit of time, because we're
Mhm.
very resistant to this, that my way isn't working. It's a disillusionment of what I valued, and an opening or an awakening to what I really do value and what I've been seeking all along.
Mhm.
Right. So, and in that moment, when the more that we are able to accept that we are wrong and make that make that shift, that decision to and experience that awareness, that healed perception, um, the more we're inviting all parts of the decision-making mind, everyone that seems to be in the dream, who's really also part of the mind, to make that, that they too can make that decision when they're ready.
Mhm.
This is not about having a conversation with anybody or trying to preach about it, or, it's about always paying attention to the healing of my own mind, which is all we have to do. Is all we have. I mean, that's all there is really. Right?
Yeah. That's
So, yeah,
our one remaining freedom is prison of
yeah,
this world, as the course puts it, is the choice of which teacher, and there's only
yeah,
two. Yeah.
and to pay attention to my mind, that should keep us pretty busy if we're doing it.
Exactly. And the other thing that you just said reminded me of is that I find helpful when I remember to apply it, and that is, in truth, we're all home. So on a
Right.
practical level, I don't have to worry about anyone else's spiritual
No,
progress or unfoldment or awakening or whatever we want to call it, enlightenment. I just have to be concerned with my forgiveness classroom and use all the specifics of things that seem to outrage me, or just minor annoyances and everything in between, and bring those more and more consistently and more quickly to the Holy Spirit's altar in my mind for reassignment therapy, so to speak, and say, okay, this isn't no longer needs to be a grievance. This can be something that I see as a silly attack. And then I see the sword in my hand. It's like, well, how'd that get there? Oh, well, I put it there. Oh, so I could drop it.
right,
I mean, I could see peace instead of this. Yeah.
right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, all right, I'll read the next paragraph, paragraph 3.
Okay.
How is this quiet found? No one can fail to find it who but seeks out its conditions. God's peace can never come where anger is, for anger must deny that peace exists. Who sees anger as justified in any way or any circumstance proclaims that peace is meaningless and must believe that it cannot exist. And so, he's making the point there, as he makes elsewhere in the course, that it's not that he knows we become angry. We become angry all the time.
Mhm.
To be here is based on an angry thought, a reaction to something that didn't really happen, and a defensiveness. But it's that justifying it. It's that believing that it's justified because of something that is that I'm a victim of the world I see. That's what we have to work with. That's what our forgiveness curriculum is all about.
Mhm.
So he says, who sees anger as justified in any way or any circumstance proclaims that peace is meaningless and must believe that it cannot exist. In this condition, peace cannot be found. Therefore, forgiveness is the necessary condition for finding the peace of God. More than this, given forgiveness, there must be peace. Peace is inevitable if we're willing to question this, to admit that we're wrong, that my anger is really not coming from, what you just said to me, or what you did again, or what I just heard on the news, or what this scary thing that seems to be happening in my body, right? It's not really about any of that. So more than this forgiveness, there must be peace. For what except attack will lead to war? And what but peace is opposite to war? Here the initial contrast stands out clear and apparent. Yet when peace is found, the war is meaningless, and it is conflict now that is perceived as non-existent and unreal. And so, to practice forgiveness as I become upset, as I find myself again angry and attacking and feeling very justified about it, because we do, to at least remember to question that. Maybe I'm not upset for the reason I think. There is a part of me that, you know, feels peaceful no matter what, is completely unaffected by the world, that is constantly working with me to learn that nothing outside me has the power to take my peace away. And I could connect with that teacher with that awareness. I could change my mind. And that's the course's process. And we work with it, as our resistance comes up, and sometimes we're more willing to catch ourselves and do that right away. And sometimes we're very, very deeply fearful and resisting. And so we are patient with ourselves. But as soon as we can, we try to make that shift or allow that shift. It's not really made by us. It's made as a result of our willingness to withdraw our projection.
We release our investment,
Yep.
by seeing that we're silently seething
Right.
sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
and just notice, like, oh, I'm actually not at peace if I'm getting upset about any specific thing that seems to be happening in the world around me, or like you say, in my body, or my bank account, or under my roof, or on the neighborhood I'm in, or whatever. It really doesn't
The
matter.
choice it's totally a choice I'm making at the level of the mind, and we have to reorient ourselves all the time back to that awareness, if our goal is to awaken from the dream. If we really do want a better way of relating here, that's the way. There's no way of resolving the conflict between two people, between two egos. That doesn't work. The only way is to resolve it in my mind, and then whatever comes through me is truly helpful, if anything needs to come through me. And that's not something that I'm attached to anymore. As long as I'm attached to it and identified with it, it's doomed.
Yeah. And another thing that what you just said, and then what was in that paragraph, it reminds me, is that, the course isn't in any way, shape, or form a cynical curriculum. It basically is really the opposite of that. It basically says that the teacher of cynicism, which is the ego, that says, see, if everything's going to go wrong because that's how it set things up. And that kind of reminds me of something I think Ken Wapnick said in Absence from Felicity, his book about Helen Schuckman. And it was, if Helen was complaining that, the course seems hard and difficult, and why isn't it working for you? And then his response, which made it into the text somewhere, I believe, is like, well, have you ever tried, applying what it actually suggests? And of course that's something that we're all, like you say, we're all working on, and we need to be very gentle and patient and persistent with ourselves, and just say, oh yeah, I must have been afraid of the peace and the loving kindness that's beyond this, wanting to pick up the sword and be right and justify my anger and all that kind of crazy stuff.
Right. Yeah, and it just demands that willingness and great honesty that my way isn't working. That's what brought us to the course in the first place, was some awareness of that, and we keep coming back to that. And this course doesn't really do anything for you if all you do is keep reading it without trying to live it. Trying to put it to work in your life. And if you do try to put it to work in your life, you will have experiences that that develop trust, that help you develop trust that there is a peace not of this world that is available to us, and that and the dawning awareness that I'm the one choosing to block it. I'm the one who's choosing to constantly become defensive. And we all know that there are times in our lives when we can have the same conversation with someone, and probably the same someone, and not be reactive. But most of the time we are. Most of the time we say it triggers us. well, that's because we're we've decided first to identify with me as what is what there is. That's all I am.
Okay.
And if I'm identified as an ego, as a personal self, of course I will be defensive,
Yeah.
you know,
I,
and
I
triggered.
I identify with the upset instead of noticing, oh, that the setup in my mind was what's caused the upset. Yeah.
Right,
I was
right.
thinking of another metaphor that uh, after 5.5 years, we've been living on the Oregon coast, and it's you put a little green twig in the ground, and half an hour later, it's got leaves and it's taken root,
So
kind of thing,
yeah,
that kind of thing.
root
So
work.
it's that kind of environment. So earlier this year, I listened to Ken Wapnick's brilliant CD, Weeding Our Garden, about looking at the thoughts in our mind. And I was thinking, with the garden is, weeding the garden is a really great metaphor. And as you were saying earlier, it's like, it takes tremendous persistence and patience and gentleness. But eventually, the weeds are a little easier to get each year as we get the roots out. And there's still a healthy crop every year, but I was noticing this last week, I got out and pulled a whole bunch of weeds, and it was like, the ground was still fairly moist. I could pull them out if I do keep at it and do it more and more consistently and get at them quicker, rather than waiting till the end of
Yeah,
summer when the ground is dry, or drier anyway. Um, it gets a little easier each year. And I think that's not a bad metaphor. It's like, well, yeah, I do catch myself a little more quickly when I start, brandishing the sword. I've got to be right here. It's
right,
like, wait a
right,
minute, this is not bringing me peace.
right. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
in all of its various forms.
Do you want to read paragraph 4?
Or sure. How is the peace of God retained once it is found? Returning anger in whatever form will drop the heavy curtain once again. I picture a thud sound, cue the
Mhm.
thud. War is again accepted as the one reality. Now, oh, there's the sword. That's why it was fresh in my mind. Now must you once again lay down your sword, although you do not recognize that you've picked it up again. How'd that get in my hand? But you will learn, as you remember, even faintly, now what happiness was yours without it, that you must have taken it again as your defense. Stop for a moment and think of this. Is conflict what you want, or is God's peace a better choice? Which gives you more? A tranquil mind is not a little gift. That's one of my favorite sentences in the whole book.
Right, yeah,
Would you not rather live than choose to die? Well, they're further emphasizing the clarity of that choice, isn't it?
right,
Yeah.
right. And he's referring to, to live as the only life there is,
Yeah.
as the united, guiltless self that is
Yeah. It
out
would be
there.
above the line in Ken's wonderful
Right.
metaphysical chart. Yeah. That
Or
that
choose
life.
to
Yeah.
die, or choose to root yourself more deeply in a dream of opposition, and one or the other that always ends in death. I mean, that's what the human condition is, right?
Yep.
So, there was one little part that I think got dropped there. Returning anger in whatever form will drop the heavy curtain once again, and the belief that peace cannot exist will certainly return.
Oh,
And
thank you.
and the,
Thank you.
and the
Yes.
ego, is always trying to convince us that peace cannot exist, that peace no longer does exist.
Mhm.
That all we can do, the best we can do, is try to find substitutes, and that involves a lot of manipulation and a lot of jockeying, and kindness to destroy, you could say,
Yeah.
trying to get people to approve of us for our own agenda, so that so that we can get our needs met. I mean, which we're all doing. There's nothing to feel guilty about. The fact that we came here this is part of what you're expected to do here,
Mhm.
but
Breathing's okay.
right,
Eating
before
food
we
and drinking
awaken,
water's okay.
we learn a different way of relating, and that's what the course is getting us to do. It doesn't really take us to the awakening part. It doesn't really spend much time even describing what that is. That's not the objective. The objective is to get us to recognize that we are decision-making minds, that we have a choice about this, and that the choice for um, that peace is not a tranquil mind is not a little gift. That one choice will yield true peace and
Mhm.
help us take another step toward true healing and true forgiveness. And the other choice will root us more deeply in a dream of constant guilt and anger, right? And sense of imminent destruction, that terrible. I mean, one choice brings safety and one choice brings threat all the time, you know. So
Rooting more deeply, it just kind of reminds me of the gardening metaphor again. And
yeah,
just we got to get it out by the roots, which is really, at the level of the mind is the only place where real solution happens. And I'm also reminded, thank you for catching that omission, the belief that peace cannot exist, that certainly returns when we choose ego is, there's that cynicism again, because the ego doesn't honestly know what peace is, and it's not even in its vocabulary. So it's the only thing it can do is be cynical, which
right,
leads to depression and discouragement and
right,
death and dissolution. But the happy inevitability of the Holy Spirit's thought system is that peace is our real nature, and it's a happy inevitability that we will return to that, even if we seem to be dreaming that it's impossible now.
right. Once we get the ego out of the way, when we're willing to do that, yep,
Yeah,
that's all there is. So
yeah.
I'm going to read paragraph 6 to
Okay.
close, I think,
Sure,
here.
sure.
We'll skip 5. What is the peace of God? No more than this, the simple understanding that his will is wholly without opposite. There is no thought that contradicts his will, yet can be true. The contrast between his will and yours but seem to be reality. In truth, there was no conflict, for his will is yours and has never changed, right? Now is the mighty will of God himself his gift to you. He does not seek to keep it for himself. Why would you seek to keep your tiny, frail imaginings apart from him? The will of God is one and all there is. This is your heritage. We are a part of that. We are seamlessly connected with that will. The universe beyond the sun and stars and all the thoughts of which you can conceive belongs to you as part of God. God's peace is the condition for his will. Attain his peace and you remember him. It's hard for us to fathom this because, we have such we're so immersed in a non-existent story of a punishing God that recognizes separation and sin. But, in the God that the Course is talking about, the non-dualistic God that the Course is talking about, is completely embraces and includes the one child. There's no place where the father leaves off and the son begins as something separate from itself. So, so there is only gain and no loss in returning to that God, to the one creator that we are, a creation of, and a completely embraced and loved by. So
Total inclusion and
total inclusion
total peace, and no one and no
and
thing
no
is left out.
opposite, right?
No opposite.
Scheme, no
How could
fun,
there
no,
be anything but peace in a completely conflict-free oneness,
right.
completely
And
non-dual?
I mean, really, the Course is not the only spiritual path that is non-dualistic. There are Eastern traditions. The higher levels of Eastern teaching are also non-dualistic. The only difference is the Course has a different path for getting to that awakening to that awareness, and the Course's path is, it incorporates Western psychology and Platonic philosophy and Shakespearean language, and it incorporates a lot of the Western world's humanity into its approach, which some people really like and some people would really not like, right?
Yeah,
But
exactly.
and mainly what it incorporates is Western psychology,
Yeah.
and that it gives us a direct way to really use this within our relationships, and it's very practical and not it's not contemplative in the way that some paths that also reach the same destination are. And it doesn't advertise itself as the only way. It just advertises itself as a kind of a little bit of a shortcut, even though that's really hard to believe if you're practicing it, because it's a long process. But it's a shortcut in the sense that it directly confronts the block, the ego, And it uses our relationships, which are always, the source of our conflict and guilt, as the classroom, the area in which we direct this and teach it and learn it.
Yeah, I just says it's a Course in Miracles, not the Course in Miracles.
That's right.
And I think Advaita Vedanta is one of the examples of the Eastern non-dual
Yep.
teachings that I don't know too much about, but I know of
Right.
it. Yeah. And the other thing that came to mind with what you shared was that resistance that we're all working with. As you're reading the last paragraph, I was thinking, sometimes I let the words really soak in, and other times it's kind of like water, rolling off
Right. We have
a slick waxy surface. And I was thinking, well, it's like when the ground is saturated, the rain just runs off, but if it's dry, it soaks in. And I think we have to kind of empty the ego moisture out of the soil of our mind, metaphorically, in order for the Holy Spirit's thoughts to sink in. So anyway,
exactly. Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, as always, wonderful conversation, Susan. I always enjoy our sharing, and look forward to the next one. So
Yeah, me
I'll
too.
post this on forisandforgiveness.com and acimblog.com. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.